Hey there, Humus Heritage community. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're tackling a problem that's been quietly destroying gardens and frustrating composters everywhere, and chances are you've either experienced it yourself or you're about to. If you've been diligently building your compost pile, doing everything by the book, only to watch your plants mysteriously decline after you've applied what you thought was black gold to your beds, you need to hear this. The uncomfortable truth is that your compost might be actively harming your plants, and we're about to pull back the curtain on exactly what's happening and how to turn this around. The fiery secret your compost is hiding. Let's start with something that challenges conventional wisdom. Heat in your compost pile isn't always the badge of honor we've been taught to believe it is. Sure, we all know that thermophilic decomposition is beneficial, breaking down organic matter efficiently while killing pathogens and weed seeds. But there's a tipping point where beneficial heat crosses into destructive territory, and most gardeners don't realize they've crossed that line until the damage is done. When your compost pile becomes excessively hot, you're not just accelerating decomposition. You're creating an environment that produces immature, unstable material laden with compounds that can burn plant roots and tie up nutrients in the soil. The perfect compost is all about equilibrium. The right balance of nitrogen-rich greens and carbon-rich browns, adequate moisture that mimics a wrung-out sponge, and sufficient oxygen flow throughout the pile. When any of these elements skews too far in one direction, your pile doesn't just underperform, it becomes a potential weapon against the very plants you're trying to nourish. That impressive plume of steam you see rising from your pile on a chilly morning might actually be your compost screaming for help. Alright, let's talk about what's really causing all that heat in your compost pile. So, the primary villain in the story of overheated compost is actually an overabundance of nitrogen-rich materials without adequate carbon to balance them out. When you load up your pile with grass clippings from your weekend mowing session, dump in buckets of fresh kitchen scraps, or add generous amounts of manure, you're basically pouring gasoline on a microbial fire. The primary villain in the story of overheated compost is, again, an overabundance of nitrogen-rich materials without adequate carbon to balance them out. When you load up your pile with grass clippings from your weekend mowing session, dump in buckets of fresh kitchen scraps, or add generous amounts of manure, you're essentially pouring gasoline on a microbial fire. These nitrogen-heavy ingredients send decomposer populations into overdrive, and their explosive metabolic activity generates intense heat that can push temperatures well beyond 160 degrees Fahrenheit. At these extreme temperatures, you're not just composting, you're inaboroam, you're damberdiwan, you donda station naim in wind in burzan. Pressure cooking your organic matter. But here's the nuance that many composting guides gloss over. Even with a theoretically balanced carbon-to-nitrogen ratio, you can still end up with a dangerously hot pile if aeration and moisture aren't properly managed. When your pile becomes compacted, oxygen can't penetrate to the center and pockets of material become starved of air. This triggers anaerobic decomposition where different bacteria take over and produce foul-smelling compounds while still generating significant heat. The moisture factor adds another layer of complexity. A pile that's too dry won't support robust microbial activity, but when you suddenly irrigate a dry, nitrogen-loaded pile, you can trigger what amounts to a thermal explosion as dormant microbes suddenly spring to life all at once. Developing the ability to diagnose an overheated pile before it sabotages your garden is a skill every serious gardener needs to cultivate. While steam is the most visible indicator, there are multiple warning signs that deserve your attention. A compost thermometer should be considered essential equipment, not an optional luxury. Is your compost too hot? Let's go through the red flag checklist together. Developing the ability to diagnose an overheated pile before it sabotages your garden is a skill every serious gardener needs to cultivate. While steam is the most visible indicator, there are, multiple warning signs that deserve your attention. A compost thermometer should be considered essential equipment, not an optional luxury. When you're consistently seeing readings above 160 degrees, you're in dangerous territory where beneficial organisms start dying off and your compost begins to sterilize itself, losing much of its biological value. The physical texture of your compost tells an important story. Reach into your pile. Properly decomposing material should feel warm and slightly damp with a crumbly texture. If instead you encounter a slimy, sticky mass that feels more like wet clay than soil, you're looking at anaerobic conditions that signal serious imbalance. Your sense of smell is equally diagnostic. Healthy compost, even when actively decomposing, carries a pleasant earthy aroma, reminiscent of forest floor. A sharp, eye-watering ammonia smell indicates excessive nitrogen concentration, while putrid odors resembling rotten eggs or sewage point to anaerobic decomposition producing hydrogen sulfide and other toxic compounds. Many gardeners only recognize these problems retrospectively, after they've applied their compost and watched their plants exhibit classic burn symptoms, wilting despite adequate water, leaf margins turning brown and crispy, stunted growth, and in severe cases complete plant death within days of application. If you've identified that your pile has entered the danger zone, immediate intervention can save both your compost and your future harvests. Your first action is to completely halt all additions of nitrogen-rich green materials. That means no more grass clippings, no more vegetable scraps, no more coffee grounds, and absolutely no manure until balance is restored. If you've identified that your pile has entered the danger zone, immediate intervention can save both your compost and your future harvests. Your first action is to completely halt all additions of nitrogen-rich green materials. That means no more grass clippings, no more vegetable scraps, no more coffee grounds, and absolutely no manure until balance is restored. Alright, next up, you need to flood your pile with carbon. Gather every brown material you can find. Dried leaves, straw, wood chips, shredded newspaper, cardboard, or even sawdust from untreated wood. Mix these materials throughout your pile generously, aiming to double or even triple the volume with these carbon additions. This influx of browns will absorb excess nitrogen, provide food for different microbial populations, and naturally slow the decomposition rate. The turning process is absolutely critical. Use a pitchfork or compost aerator to completely break up your pile mixing materials, from the hot center to the cooler edges, and vice versa. This aeration accomplishes multiple goals. It releases trapped heat, introduces fresh oxygen to revive aerobic decomposition, breaks up compacted zones, and ensures even distribution of your carbon additions. If your pile is excessively dry and you live in a hot climate, strategic watering can actually help through evaporative cooling, but add water slowly in the evening when temperatures are lower and never saturate the pile. For overly wet piles, the solution is spreading material out to dry, while incorporating additional browns, working toward that ideal moisture level, where a squeezed handful releases just a few drops of water. The temperature sweet spot for compost falls between 90 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit, a range where thermophilic bacteria work their magic efficiently without creating harmful conditions or destroying beneficial organisms. Staying within this zone requires developing disciplined composting habits that become second nature. The temperature sweet spot for compost falls between 90 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit, a range where thermophilic bacteria work their magic efficiently without creating harmful conditions or destroying beneficial organisms. Staying within this zone requires developing disciplined composting habits that become second nature. For every contribution of kitchen scraps or fresh green material, commit to adding 2 to 3 times that volume in brown material. This ratio might seem conservative, but it provides the buffer that prevents temperature spikes while ensuring steady, controlled decomposition. Regular turning is non-negotiable, particularly during active decomposition phases. Plan to aerate your pile weekly as a baseline, increasing frequency to every few days if you notice temperature creeping upward or detect any off odors developing. Moisture management deserves constant attention. During dry periods, water your pile just as you would your garden beds. During rainy seasons, protect your pile with a tarp or add extra browns to absorb excess moisture. Perhaps most challenging for eager gardeners is embracing patience during the curing phase. Moisture management deserves constant attention. During dry periods, water your pile just as you would your garden beds. During rainy seasons, protect your pile with a tarp or add extra browns to absorb excess moisture. Perhaps most challenging for eager gardeners is embracing patience during the curing phase. Even after your pile has stopped steaming and temperatures have dropped to ambient levels, the compost isn't finished. This final maturation period, lasting anywhere from 4 weeks to 3 months depending on conditions, is when the remaining organic compounds stabilize, pH normalizes, and the material transforms into true humus. You'll know your compost has fully matured when it's uniformly dark and crumbly, with no recognizable pieces of the original materials remaining, and it carries that distinctive sweet earthy smell of rich forest soil. When you're ready to use it, incorporate it thoroughly into your garden soil rather than applying it as a thick surface layer. And, exercise caution around newly transplanted seedlings until you're absolutely confident in your compost's maturity. Properly made compost doesn't just feed plants, it rebuilds soil structure, introduces beneficial microorganisms, improves water retention, and creates the foundation for truly regenerative gardening. If this deep dive into the science and art of compost management has given you new insights and practical solutions, show your support by hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications so you never miss our detailed gardening content. Share this video with your fellow gardeners who might be struggling with unexplained plant problems. You could be the key to transforming their growing season. Until next time, keep building that humus heritage, and remember, the best gardens are grown on patience, observation, and compost that's truly ready to nourish life.